You know that feeling when there's a huge problem, something everyone can see, but for some reason nobody's really talking about it? Well, that's exactly what a series of street interviews in Montpellier, France tried to get to the bottom of. And the answers they got? They revealed this really complex web of frustration, fear, and a deep, kind of unsettling silence. So let's unravel not just what people said, but maybe more importantly, what they were too afraid to say. And this is the question that really kicks everything off. The interviewer, sensing this big disconnect between France's problems and the public's quiet response, just went out and asked a really simple question. Why do the French remain silent? The answers they got are what we're going to dive into today. So right off the bat, the first theme that comes up again and again is this deep, personal sense of growing insecurity. And we're not talking about some abstract political idea here. For the people being interviewed, this is their daily reality, a feeling that the country they grew up in has really changed, and not for the better. And you see this feeling expressed as this really sharp contrast between the past and the present. One woman looks back to the 80s, when she felt safe walking pretty much anywhere. But now she says she's never been more afraid. Another person puts it in this really visceral way. They live with peur au ventre, a fear deep in their gut. That's a powerful way to describe a constant underlying anxiety. And look, this isn't just nostalgia. It has real-world consequences. One mother actually shared that her son is so disillusioned that he wants to leave France, just leave it all behind. When the country's own youth starts looking for the exit door, it really shows you how deep this feeling of decline goes. Okay, so if people feel unsafe, what do they think is the cause? This is where the conversations get incredibly tense. When the interviewer starts to probe, to ask about the source of this insecurity, the answers are just filled with hesitation, discomfort, a real reluctance to speak plainly. So the interviewer just asks it directly. Where does this insecurity come from? Their response is, well, they're pretty revealing. The very first response from one woman is so telling. She just says, I dare not say it. That immediate self-censorship, it speaks volumes. Before any answer's even given, there's fear. Fear of the words themselves and what might happen if she says them out loud. After a little more probing, the same woman starts to explain, but listen to how she phrases it. She uses these vague pronouns. The incidents, it's them. The prisons, it's them. And she immediately follows up with a qualifier. Not only them, but a large part. You can almost feel the internal struggle there, wanting to name a source but then immediately pulling back. So what becomes crystal clear is this profound hesitation to connect insecurity with immigration. People kind of dance around the topic. They'll mention an overrepresentation of one community, but without actually naming anyone. It's a connection that many seem to feel, but they are clearly terrified to actually say out loud. But, and this is absolutely crucial, this view is not universal, not by a long shot. For every person who makes that hesitant link, you have another interviewee offering a completely different take, either defending immigration or pointing to entirely different reasons for France's problems. And you can just see the deep divide right here. Arguments for immigration are often about economics. We need them for work. And tradition. France is a land of asylum. But the counter-arguments push back just as directly. That French people will do those jobs, they just go abroad for them. That saying immigrants do jobs French people won't is an insult, implying the French are lazy. And that, like it or not, statistics do show a link to insecurity. In fact, some people just flat out reject the whole idea of rising insecurity. This resident of Montpellier describes a totally different reality, walking their dog at 2 a.m. with no problems at all. For them, the city is safe, life is good, which is a direct contradiction to that fear in the gut we heard about earlier. Then you have others who agree, yeah, there are problems, but they attribute them to a much broader social decay. The blame gets placed on everything from just a general lack of civility and education to rising individualism. Some point to negative peer pressure, what one person calls racaille or riffraff, while another suggests the real root cause is capitalism itself, putting profit ahead of people. So this brings us right back to our central question. With all these strong, conflicting opinions floating around, why does silence seem to win? Well, the interviewees themselves offer some pretty fascinating reasons for why they just choose to disengage. One popular theory that gets thrown out is that it's all a deliberate strategy of distraction. This person suggests the media and the government focus like a laser on foreign conflicts, Palestine, Ukraine, you name it, precisely to create a diversion, to hide their own incompetence in dealing with problems at home. And this leads to what one woman perfectly calls the ostrich policy. It's not just something that's happening to them, it's a conscious choice they're making. She straight up admits to willfully ignoring the news to protect her own mental health, to reduce her anxiety, and she says, bluntly, I assume it entirely because it does me a lot of good. You can see how this creates this really powerful kind of vicious cycle of avoidance. The news is anxietygenic, it's anxiety-inducing, so people tune out. And yeah, that makes them feel better personally, but it also disconnects them from the issues, which just reinforces a sense of powerlessness and ultimately leads to inaction, leads to silence. So what you realize is that the silence isn't empty at all. It's actually filled with this complex cocktail of emotions and fears. People are quiet because of anxiety and media distrust, sure, but also because of this deep fear. Fear of being labeled a facho, a fascist, and a real belief that speaking your mind just brings you problems. One person tries to explain their caution as just a professional habit of being nuanced. But the interviewer offers this really powerful pushback, and it's captured perfectly in this quote. Nuance is also like silence. It's the silence that has brought us here. The suggestion is that this constant need to soften opinions, to be so cautious, has basically become the same thing as silence. And it's just allowed the problems to get worse. And this leaves us with the core tension of these entire interviews. On one hand, you have people who are afraid to speak their minds, and on the other, you have people who are actively choosing not to listen. It leaves all of us with a final, really challenging question. In an environment like that, what happens to the truth?